The sun had already begun to punish the reddened earth when Emily awoke. Sitting on the edge of her wooden bed, she observed through the window the dry branches of trees that twisted like skeletal fingers pointing to the sky. The drought had taken over Texas once again. "Emily, come have breakfast," Sarah's voice echoed from the kitchen. The 11-year-old girl adjusted her simple dress and ran to the small table where her mother served black coffee and a homemade biscuit she had prepared. "Mum, today is market." "Day, isn't it?" asked Emily, her eyes shining with expectation. "Yes, my daughter. But don't get too excited. We'll just buy what we need and come back quickly. Money is tight this month." Sarah was a strong woman, marked by hard work and the Texas sun, since her husband, Jack Miller, had left to work on farms in the South. She had been taking care of her daughter and the small adobe house where they lived by herself. "Will there be horses at the market today?" Emily asked while chewing her biscuit. "There should be, as always. Why do you ask?" "No reason," the girl replied, hiding a smile. The stories her father told about horses before he left had created deep roots in Emily's heart. She remembered him describing how each animal had its own personality, how some were naturally brave and others had gentleness in their eyes. Jack Miller was known throughout the region as a cowboy who spoke the language of horses. While helping her mother with household chores, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the market. It was the only event that brought life to that forgotten piece of Texas. People from various parts of the region came to buy, sell, and exchange goods, animals, and stories. "Daydreaming again, girl?" Sarah interrupted her thoughts. "Finish sweeping there and we'll go." The walk to Hope Springs took almost an hour. The midday sun was punishing, but Emily barely felt the heat. Her mind was occupied imagining what it would be like to have a horse of her own, an animal that would take her anywhere, that would be her friend in times of loneliness. A distant dream for a poor girl from rural Texas. The Hope Springs livestock market was buzzing with activity. Colorful stalls sold everything: fabrics, household utensils, fruits, vegetables, and jerky. The smell of food mixed with the odor of animals and the dust that rose with each step. For Emily, it was like entering another world. "Don't wander too far," warned Sarah as she headed to the vegetable stand. Emily nodded, but her feet were already leading her to the part of the market where the animals were kept. She passed through pens with goats, sheep, and pigs until she reached the area where the horses were. There were animals of all types, large and imposing, small and skittish. Some whinnied nervously, while others calmly nibbled at the straw scattered on the ground. That's when she saw him, in a small pen away from the others. A brown horse, skinny, with its head down and a lost gaze. Its coat was dull and old scars covered its body. There was no one nearby, as if that animal didn't deserve attention. Emily approached slowly. Something about that horse attracted her. Perhaps the air of abandonment, perhaps the fact that, even mistreated, there was still dignity in its posture. The animal slightly raised its head when she approached, its eyes meeting hers for a brief moment. "Like that one?" A rough voice surprised her. She turned and saw a burly man with a soiled straw hat partially covering his sunburned face. His small eyes analyzed her with a mixture of curiosity and irony. "He looks sad," Emily responded honestly. The man let out a dry laugh. "Sad? That one's finished. Not even good for the slaughterhouse. I'll have to practically give him away if someone's crazy enough to take him." Emily felt a twinge in her chest upon hearing those words. Her father always said that a horse is never truly finished, just waiting for someone who knows how to awaken its true nature. "How much do you want for him?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. The man looked her up and down as if assessing whether she was serious. "Girl, you don't have money to buy a halter, let alone a horse. Go find your mother." But Emily didn't move. Her eyes returned to the horse, which was now watching her with what seemed to be renewed interest. "I have money," she stated, reaching into the pocket of her dress where she kept the coins she had been saving for months, the fruit of small jobs she did for neighbors. The man narrowed his eyes, suddenly interested. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. "How much do you have there, girl?" asked the man, now visibly curious. Emily took out a small cloth bundle from her pocket, where she kept her savings. They were just a few coins and crumpled bills, the result of months helping Mrs. Wilson clean her house, carrying water for Mr. Tony, and doing other small tasks around the village. "I have $23, she said, carefully counting the bills and coins in the palm of her hand. The man let out a laugh that attracted glances from nearby people. $23. "Girl, that won't even buy the rope to pull the beast." Even so, he looked at the skinny horse and then at the other people around, who were watching with an air of curiosity. Nobody seemed interested in that weak and mistreated animal. If he couldn't sell it, he would have to pay someone to take it away. "Look, I'll do you a favor, $50 and the horse is yours," he said, trying to appear generous, but with a gleam of opportunism in his eyes. Emily's heart tightened. She didn't have $50. She looked once more at the horse and saw something in its eyes, an almost extinguished gleam, but still present. It was as if it was asking for a chance. "23 is all I have," she replied firmly, surprising the seller. "You yourself said he's not worth much." The man scratched his unshaven beard, visibly irritated, but at the same time anxious to get rid of the animal. $30 and that's final, he proposed, crossing his arms to signal he wouldn't accept less. Emily bit her lower lip. She was $7 short. She looked around desperately until her eyes landed on something hanging from her neck, the small silver medallion her father had given her before leaving. With trembling hands, she removed the necklace. "This medallion is worth much more than $7, she said, extending the silver object along with the crumpled bills. The man took the medallion, analyzed it for a moment, and nodded. "Deal. Take this pile of bones before I change my mind." He had barely spoken these words, and Emily was already inside, the pen approaching the horse carefully. The animal backed away slightly, distrustful. "Easy," she whispered, remembering her father's stories about how to approach a frightened horse. "I won't hurt you." She slowly extended her hand, allowing the horse to catch her scent. After a few seconds that seemed like an eternity, he relaxed a little, letting her come closer. "How are you going to take him?" asked the seller, handing her an old rope. "This wreck can barely walk." "He'll walk with me," Emily replied with high confidence that she didn't know where it came from. Carefully, she tied the rope around the horse's neck, making an improvised halter. To the seller's surprise, the animal allowed her to lead it out of the pen without resistance. "Crazy," muttered the man, counting the money with a satisfied smile. "She'll regret her purchase, and it won't last a week." Emily didn't hear. She was completely absorbed in her new companion, slowly guiding him through the market corridors. People made way, some laughing, others looking with pity, but she didn't care. There was something in that horse's gaze that made her believe she had made the right choice. That's when a familiar scream cut through the air. "Emily! For heaven's sake, what is this?" Sarah was coming towards her, her face contorted in a mixture of astonishment and fury. The shopping bags almost fell from her hands when she came face to face with her daughter leading the skinny horse. "Mom, I bought him," Emily explained quickly, before her mother could say anything else. "He was going to the slaughterhouse. Nobody wanted him." "Have you lost your mind, girl?" Sarah interrupted, lowering her voice so that the curious people around wouldn't hear. "With what money did you buy this thing?" "With what I saved from working," Emily replied, omitting the part about the medallion. She knew her mother would be even more furious if she knew. "And where do you think you're going to put this animal? We barely have food for ourselves." "I'll take care of him, Mom. I promise he won't be any trouble," Emily pleaded, her eyes watering. "He just needs a chance." Sarah looked at the skeletal animal and then at the determination on her daughter's face. She knew that look. It was the same as Jack Miller's when he decided something, and there was no force in the world that could make him change his mind. "This is going to be a problem," she muttered, shaking her head. "Let's go now before I change my mind." The way back. Home was slow and silent. The horse could barely walk, stopping every few meters to catch his breath. Emily encouraged him with soft words, while Sarah walked ahead, still processing the madness her daughter had done. When they finally arrived, the sun was already setting, coloring the Texas sky with shades of orange and red. Emily led the horse to the back of the yard, where there was a small drought-resistant tree. She tied the rope to the trunk, leaving enough slack for the animal to move. "I'm going to get water for him," she said, running to the well. Sarah watched her daughter, filling an old bucket and carefully taking it to the horse. There was so much affection in that simple gesture that she felt her heart soften a little. "What name are you going to give him?" she asked, approaching. Emily smiled, grateful for the truce. "Brave," she replied without hesitation. "He's been through a lot of bad things, but he's still here. That's being brave, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, looking at the mistreated animal with different eyes. Perhaps there was something there that only her daughter could see. That night, while Sarah was already asleep, Emily remained by Brave's side, talking softly, telling him stories that her father had told her. The horse was lying down, motionless, but his eyes followed every movement of the girl. "You're going to get better," she promised, gently caressing his tangled mane. "And one day, we'll ride together across this whole countryside." Brave blinked, as if he understood. For the first time since she had seen him at the market, Emily felt there was hope. The first rays of sun had barely appeared when Emily was already up. She had slept little, worried about Brave. Still in her nightgown, she ran to the yard and found the horse lying exactly as she had left him the night before. "Good morning, Brave," she whispered, kneeling beside him. The animal was breathing. With difficulty, his eyes half closed. He showed no reaction to the girl's presence, which worried her even more. "You need to eat," Emily said, extending a handful of grass she had gathered near the dry creek. Brave merely turned his head to the opposite side. He refused to eat, as if he had given up fighting. "What do I do now?" she murmured to herself, feeling despair grow. At that moment, Sarah appeared, still adjusting the apron around her waist. "He didn't eat anything?" she asked, observing the motionless animal. Emily shook her head, her eyes watering. "I think he's very weak, Mom. I don't know what to do." Sarah sighed. She saw the anguish on her daughter's face, and despite all the problems that horse could bring, she couldn't bear to see her suffer. "Let's try something else," she said, heading to the kitchen and returning with a bowl containing a yellowish liquid. "It's a little water with honey and bran. Maybe he can swallow this." Emily looked at her mother with gratitude. Carefully, she brought the bowl to Brave's dry lips. At first, he didn't react, but after a few attempts, he licked a little of the liquid. He drank. Emily exclaimed, her face lighting up with a smile. "It's a start," Sarah commented, allowing herself a small smile, "but we have a lot of work ahead if we want him to survive." The news of the horse purchase spread quickly through the village. That same morning, while Emily was trying to feed Brave once more, the first unexpected visit appeared. "So it's true then," said Mr. Anderson, leaning on the improvised fence that delimited the land. "Sarah's daughter bought that skeletal horse from the market." Before Emily could respond, two other women approached, stretching their necks to see better. "My goodness, the animal is more dead than alive," commented Mrs. Zephyr, shaking her head. "It was money thrown away, girl." "No, it wasn't," Emily responded firmly, continuing to caress Brave's neck. "He just needs care." "No care saves an animal in that state," opined Mr. Anderson. "It will just bring expenses and problems." The comments continued, with more and more people appearing to see the moribund horse and the stubborn girl, who believed she could save him. Opinions varied between pity, scorn, and genuine concern, but the consensus was clear. That horse wouldn't last long. Emily ignored all of them. She focused only on Brave, trying different types of food, massaging his weak legs, talking to him as if he were a person. In the afternoon, she managed to get him to drink more of the mixture prepared by her mother and even eat a little fresh grass. "Don't listen to what they say," she murmured in the horse's ear as the last curious onlookers walked away. "I know you're strong." The following days followed a similar pattern. Emily woke up before dawn, spent every free moment beside Brave, and faced the gazes and comments of local residents. Some, like Mrs. Wilson, for whom Emily used to work, brought leftover food that could help strengthen the animal. "I don't know if it will help, but my late husband always said carrots were good for horses," said the lady, handing some wilted carrots to Emily. Others, however, were less kind. "That horse is just going to be a loss," stated Mr. Bigode, known for his sharp tongue. "When he's gone, it will be a relief for everyone." Each negative comment hurt Emily, but also strengthened her determination. She remembered her father's stories about horses that had exceeded all expectations, animals that seemed to have no chance but with the right care had completely recovered. On the 5th day, the seemingly impossible happened. Emily was sitting next to Brave, softly humming a song her father used to sing, when the horse for the first time tried to stand up on his own. "Mom! Mom!" shouted Emily, running into the house. "Come see!" Sarah rushed out, fearing the worst, but what she saw left her speechless. Brave was standing, his legs trembling but definitely standing. "I don't believe it," she murmured, observing the animal that everyone had given up on. Emily approached slowly, afraid of startling him. Brave turned his head in her direction, and to the girl's surprise took a few hesitant steps toward her. "He's getting better, Mum," said Emily, her voice cracking with emotion. "I knew he could do it." Sarah nodded, beginning to think that perhaps her daughter wasn't so wrong after all. That animal seemed to have found a reason to fight. Progress continued in the following days. Brave ate more, walked a little around the yard, and even allowed Emily to brush him with an old brush that Mr. Anderson surprisingly had lent her. "It's true that I doubted, but I like to see determination," explained the man, also handing over some feed. "My mule doesn't use this anymore anyway." Gradually, Brave's dull coat began to gain a slight shine, and his ribs, although still visible, no longer seemed about to break through the skin. There was life in his eyes, a spark of hope that grew each day. That's when the unexpected happened. On the morning of the 10th day after the purchase, Emily went out to the yard and found a man leaning on the fence, observing Brave. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a leather hat that partially shadowed his face, marked by the sun. There was something intimidating about his posture. "Good morning," said Emily cautiously. "Can I help you?" The man turned slowly, revealing an angular face and eyes as cold as stones. "So it's true," he said, ignoring the greeting. "Someone bought the horse." Something in his voice made Emily instinctively back away. Brave, who until then had been calmly grazing, suddenly raised his head, his ears alert. "Who are you, sir?" asked Emily, placing herself between the stranger and the horse. The man smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My name is Hank Dawson," he answered. "And that horse you have there, he's still mine." "Yours," Emily repeated, feeling a chill run down her spine. "But I bought him at the market. I paid for him." Hank gave a dry laugh, running his hand over his poorly shaven chin. "And who do you think sold him to the guy who sold him to you?" he said, pointing to Brave. "That horse is called Lightning, and he cost me a lot of money years ago." Emily frowned, confused. "Then why did you sell him?" "Business, girl. He wasn't serving me anymore," responded Hank with a careless shrug. "But now I see that I made a mistake. Beautiful horse like that." There was something predatory in the way Hank looked at Brave, something that made Emily's stomach turn. The horse remained on alert, his body tense like a stretched rope. "His name isn't Lightning," said Emily firmly. "His name is Brave, and he's mine now." Hank narrowed his eyes, all false cordiality draining from his face. "Listen here, girl. Can I help with something?" Sarah's voice cut through the air like a knife. She had come out of the house and was now positioning herself beside her daughter, arms crossed and a defiant look. Hank changed his posture, straightening his shoulders and forcing a smile. "Mrs. Sarah, I presume. I was just talking with your daughter about the horse." "I see," responded Sarah dryly. "And from what I understand, the horse is ours now. Emily bought him at the market, with witnesses." "A child can't make legal deals," argued Hank, his voice suddenly loaded with false authority. "A child under my supervision can," retorted Sarah. "And the deal was made. If you have any complaint, I suggest you look for the person to whom you sold the animal first." For a moment it seemed that Hank was going to argue, but something in Sarah's determined gaze made him back down. "This isn't over," he muttered, adjusting his hat. "We'll see each other again." With those words, he turned and walked away with long strides, leaving behind a cloud of dust and apprehension. As soon as he disappeared around the bend in the road, Emily turned to her mother. "Mom, who is he? Why is he saying Brave is his?" Sarah sighed, putting her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Hank Dawson is a former cowboy known in these parts," she explained, leading Emily back to the horse, who now seemed calmer. "They say he used to have many horses, but treated them badly, forcing them beyond their limits in rodeos and races." "So Brave was his?" asked Emily, distressed. "It could be," admitted Sarah. "But that doesn't matter now. You bought him legally, and the seller had the right to sell him. Hank is just trying to take advantage." Even with her mother's reassuring words, Emily couldn't help but worry. There was something in Hank's gaze that promised trouble. In the days that followed, worry gave way to a routine of intense care for Brave. The horse continued his surprising recovery, gaining weight and strength each day. Emily spent hours brushing his coat, which was now beginning to regain its shine, and taking him for short walks around the land surrounding the house. One afternoon, as they were returning from one of these walks, Emily noticed Mr. Anderson frantically waving from the fence. "Girl, you need to see this," he called, pointing to a small group of people gathered in the central square of the village. Intrigued, Emily tied Brave in the shade of a tree and followed the neighbor. In the square, a man in a worn suit, whom she recognized as the local town hall employee, was putting up a poster on the central post. "Great Hope Springs Agricultural Exposition," announced the poster in colorful letters. "Animal show, equine. Beauty contest, cash prizes. It's 2 months from now," explained Mr. Anderson, pointing to the date on the poster. "Everyone from the region comes. There will be important people, buyers from the south, all kinds of events." Emily felt her heart accelerate. An exposition, a chance to show everyone what Brave was really worth. "You should enter that horse. It's of yours," suggested Mr. Anderson, surprising Emily. "If he keeps improving as he is, by then he'll be unrecognizable." The idea fixed itself in Emily's mind like a seed that finds fertile soil. Just imagine Brave, the horse everyone had discarded, majestically entering the arena, causing admiration instead of pity. It was more than a dream. It was a real possibility. Back home, Emily told the news to Sarah, who listened with a mixture of concern and interest. "An exposition is a serious thing, daughter," she pondered. "You need registration, documentation. For the animal, everything just right." "But we can get that, can't we?" insisted Emily, her eyes shining with expectation. Before Sarah could respond, a noise coming from the yard caught the attention of both. They ran outside and found Brave restless, whinnying and pulling the rope that tied him to the tree. "What's wrong, Brave?" asked Emily, approaching to calm him. That's when she noticed someone had been there. The wooden fence that separated the yard from the road was slightly damaged, as if someone had tried to break it. And on the ground, large and fresh footprints marked the beaten earth. "Mom, look at this," called Emily, pointing to the marks on the ground. Sarah approached, her face hardening when she saw the evidence. "Hank," she murmured, looking around suspiciously. "Must have come to spy." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. The feeling that they were being watched was disturbing. "What are we going to do?" she asked, instinctively moving closer to Brave, as if wanting to protect him. "For now, nothing," responded Sarah after a moment of reflection. "But we'll keep an eye out, and don't leave Brave alone, not even for a minute." That night, Emily had difficulty sleeping. Every noise from outside seemed like a threat. Every shadow that passed by the window made her sit up in bed, alert. When she finally managed to fall asleep, she dreamed of Brave running free across the countryside, his coat shining in the sun, strong and healthy, far from any danger. She woke up determined. If Hank was planning something, she needed to anticipate. The agricultural exposition could be more than a chance to show Brave's worth. It could be a way to protect him, to publicly establish that he had a new home, a new life. "We're going to enter the exposition," she declared during breakfast. "If Brave is officially registered as mine, Hank won't be able to do anything." Sarah looked at her daughter for a long moment, seeing the determination in her eyes. "All right," she finally agreed. "But this is going to be work, and we'll need the help of someone who understands the laws." Emily smiled, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude. Her mother, who had initially been against the purchase of Brave, was now by her side, willing to fight for their future. The following morning brought a scorching heat, typical of rural Texas. Emily woke up early, determined to proceed with her plan. After taking care of Brave, who now happily accepted food and allowed himself to be brushed, she and Sarah set off for town. Hope Springs wasn't large, just a few dirt roads that met in a central square where the church, the small town hall, and half a dozen businesses were located. It was to the town hall office that they headed. "Good morning, Mr. Gerald," greeted Sarah upon entering the dusty premises. The official, a thin man with thick glasses, raised his eyes from the papers he was examining. "Sarah, what a surprise. What brings you here?" "We've come because of the agricultural exposition," she explained, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder. "We want to enter a horse." Mr. Gerald adjusted his glasses, looking with curiosity at the girl. "A horse?" he repeated, confused. "I didn't know you had a horse." "It's Brave," interrupted Emily, anxious. "I bought him at the market a few weeks ago." Mr. Gerald's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, that mistreated horse, everyone's talking about it. They say you're working miracles with him, girl." Emily smiled shyly. It was the first time she had heard something positive about her decision outside the family circle. "So what do we need to enter him?" asked Sarah, bringing the conversation back to the subject. Mr. Gerald began to explain the procedures, forms to fill out, fees to pay, the need for a health certificate issued by a veterinarian, and, most importantly, documents proving ownership of the animal. "That's where the problem lies," confessed Sarah. "Emily bought the horse at the market, but it was an informal sale. We don't have any paperwork." Mr. Gerald's smile diminished. "That complicates things. Without proper documentation, anyone can contest the ownership." "But I paid for him," protested Emily, feeling despair grow. "Many people saw it." Yes, I don't doubt it," responded Mr. Gerald, scratching his head. "But in legal terms, we need something more substantial, especially because—" He hesitated. "Because what?" pressed Sarah. "Because Hank Dawson has already been here," admitted Mr. Gerald, lowering his voice. "He came just yesterday asking about how to register a horse he says was stolen from him." Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. So that was it. Hank was trying to use the law to take Brave back. "He's a liar!" she exclaimed, tears of anger blurring her vision. "He sold Brave because he was no longer useful to him, and now that he's getting better, he wants him back." "Calm down, my daughter," said Sarah, hugging her. "We'll resolve this." Mr. Gerald observed the scene with evident discomfort. He took off his glasses, nervously cleaned them on his shirt, and then put them back on. "Look, I can't take sides," he said cautiously. "But—" He lowered his voice even more, leaning over the desk. "You should look for Ms. Rebecca Thompson. She's a lawyer, came from the city a few years ago. If anyone can help with this legal issue, it's her." Sarah thanked him for the tip, and they left the town hall with heavy hearts, but with a new direction to follow. Ms. Rebecca Thompson's office was in the newer part of town, a two-story building, painted blue with a discreet sign at the entrance. When they rang the bell, they were greeted by a middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in an elegant bun and lively eyes that seemed to evaluate everything around her. "How can I help you?" she asked, indicating the chairs in front of her immaculately organized desk. Sarah began to explain the situation, but soon Emily took the floor, passionately relating how she had found Brave, the deplorable state he was in, the miraculous recovery, and now Hank's threats. Ms. Thompson listened in silence, occasionally making notes in a notebook. When Emily finished, she leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "It's a moving story," she said with a slight smile, "and the law may be on your side, even without formal documentation." "How so?" asked Sarah, surprised. "Well, there are a few things to consider here," explained the lawyer. "First, if Hank really sold the horse, even to an intermediary, he legally transferred his ownership rights. Second, we have the aspect of animal welfare. If the horse was in such precarious conditions, one could argue that there was negligence on the part of the previous owner. Emily felt a spark of hope. So we can prove that Brave is mine. We can build a case, responded Ms. Thompson cautiously. But we need evidence. Witnesses to the purchase, photos of the state of the animal when you acquired it, proof that you are properly caring for him. We have the witnesses, exclaimed Emily. Everyone at the market saw, and Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Wilson, many people from the village have seen how we're caring for him. Excellent, the lawyer smiled. And what about photos? Emily's face fell. They didn't have a camera, and even if they did, they hadn't thought to document Brave's initial state. We don't have photos, she admitted sadly. Ms. Thompson thought. For a moment. There's something else that could help, she said finally. A veterinary examination detailing the animal's conditions, including old scars, signs of mistreatment, and the current state of recovery. But we don't have money to pay for a veterinarian, interjected Sarah, concerned. The lawyer gave a reassuring smile. I know someone who can help. Dr. Matthew Parker comes to town once a week to attend to the animals in the region. He has a huge heart and detests cases of mistreatment. I'm sure that, upon hearing your story, he'll do the examination for a symbolic value, or perhaps even for free. You're going to help us then? Asked Emily, hardly daring to believe. Ms. Thompson looked directly into the girl's eyes, seeing there the determination and genuine love for the animal. I'll help, she confirmed. And don't worry about the fees now, we can discuss that later. Emily couldn't contain her emotion and, on impulse, went around the desk to hug the lawyer, who seemed momentarily surprised, but soon returned the gesture affectionately. Thank you, repeated Emily between tears of relief. Don't thank me yet, warned Ms. Thompson, although her tone was gentle. We have a lot of work ahead. Hank Dawson isn't known for giving up easily, and he has influential friends in the region. On the way back home, Emily and Sarah excitedly discussed the next steps. Dr. Parker would be in town the following Monday, and Ms. Thompson had already arranged an appointment for Brave. Mom, do you think we'll succeed? Asked Emily as they walked along the dusty road. I don't know, daughter, answered Sarah honestly, but now we have people willing to help us, and that's already a victory. What they didn't know was that, while they were talking hopefully, other plans were being made. At Mr. Joaquin's store, Hank Dawson was drinking whiskey with 3 other men, his face contorted in a bitter expression. So the girl hired the city lawyer, he commented, slamming the glass on the table. Think, that's going to stop me. That horse is worth a lot of money, and I'm going to have him back one way or another. The weekend passed in a mixture of anxiety and hope. Emily dedicated every free moment to caring for Brave, who was responding better and better. His coat, once dull and lifeless, was beginning to gain shine, and his legs, although still thin, now supported his body more firmly. The animal's personality was also gradually changing. From an apathetic and resigned being, Brave was transforming into a more alert and even playful horse. On Monday, as agreed, Dr. Parker arrived at the small property. He was a middle-aged man with a graying beard and kind eyes, carrying a worn leather bag that betrayed years of hard work. Ms. Thompson accompanied him, elegant even in simple attire, contrasting with the rural environment. So this is the famous Brave, commented the veterinarian, carefully approaching the horse. Ms. Thompson told me your story. Brave surprisingly didn't back away from the stranger's approach. It seemed that after weeks living with Emily, he had rediscovered the ability to trust. He's much better now, said Emily proudly. In the beginning, he could barely stand. Dr. Parker initiated a thorough examination, feeling each part of Brave's body, checking his eyes, teeth, and hooves, noting everything on a clipboard. His countenance became increasingly grave as he discovered new marks and scars. This animal suffered severe and prolonged mistreatment, he finally declared, his voice laden with contained indignation. He has scars from spurs used with excessive force, whip marks, and these calluses on the ankles indicate he was kept chained for long periods. Emily felt tears in her eyes, imagining the suffering Brave had endured. But the most impressive thing, continued the veterinarian, gently caressing the horse's neck. "Is this mark here?" He pointed to a small area where the hair grew differently, forming a pattern that vaguely resembled the letter R. "What is that?" asked Sarah, approaching. "To see better. It's a brand partially faded by time," explained Dr. Parker. "It was common for breeders to mark their animals with the initials of their ranches." "R?" repeated Emily, confused. "But Hank doesn't start with R." Dr. Parker and Ms. Thompson exchanged a significant look. "No, it doesn't," agreed the lawyer. "Which leads us to an interesting question. If this horse has the mark of another owner, how does Hank claim it was always his?" It was at that moment that Mr. Anderson appeared at the gate, panting as if he had been running. "Excuse the intrusion," he said, taking off his hat as a sign of respect. "But I heard the veterinarian would be here today, and I thought you needed to know something." Everyone turned to the old man, curious. "I recognized that horse as soon as I saw him improving," continued Mr. Anderson, approaching. "I wasn't sure at first because he was so run down, but now I have no more doubts." "You know Brave?" asked Emily, surprised. "Not by that name, but yes," confirmed Mr. Anderson, looking at the horse with a nostalgic expression. "This is Lightning, the best rodeo horse Texas has ever seen. He belonged to Heritage Ranch, owned by Old Man Roberts." A stunned silence followed the declaration. It was Miss Thompson who broke it. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Anderson?" "Absolutely," he answered, pointing to the mark the veterinarian had shown. "That's the Heritage Ranch mark, and I would recognize that. To way of running anywhere, it was like seeing lightning cutting through the arena." "Lightning," murmured Emily, approaching the horse. "Was that your real name?" As if in response, Brave whinnied softly, resting his muzzle on the girl's hand. "What happened to him?" asked Sarah. "How did he end up with Hank?" Mr. Anderson scratched his head, visibly uncomfortable. "After Old Man Roberts passed away about 3 years ago, the ranch went through difficulties. His son didn't have the same knack for business. He ended up selling many animals, including Lightning. Hank was starting to make a name in rodeos at the time, and they say he paid good money for him. And made him run until he couldn't anymore," completed Dr. Parker, examining the horse's legs again. "There are clear signs of tendon injuries, probably caused by excessive and repetitive effort. He will never be able to compete in rodeos again." Emily caressed Brave's neck, feeling a mixture of sadness and indignation. "I don't want him to compete anyway," she said, determined. "I want him to be happy, that's all." Miss Thompson, who had been absorbing all the information with analytical attention, opened a smile. "Mr. Anderson, would you be willing to testify about the origin of this horse if necessary?" "Of course I would," answered the old man, adjusting his hat. "I'm not afraid of Hank Dawson, if that's what you want to know." The lawyer nodded, satisfied. "This changes everything. If we can prove that the horse originally belonged to Heritage Ranch and was legally sold to Hank, we'll have a much more solid basis to argue that the subsequent sale was also legal. And more, we can use the history of mistreatment to argue that morally, he no longer has any right to the animal." Dr. Parker finished his examination, making some more notes on his clipboard. "I'll prepare a detailed report on his conditions," he said. "I'll include everything, the signs of mistreatment, the current state, the evolution of the treatment. I'll make it very clear that his recovery is due exclusively to the care he has been receiving here. And I'm going to contact the current owner of Heritage Ranch," added Ms. Thompson. "If we can obtain official documentation of the original sale to Hank, we'll have an even stronger case." Emily could hardly believe so much news. Brave wasn't just any horse, he was Lightning, a champion, a special animal that by chance of fate had crossed her path. When Dr. Parker and Ms. Thompson were preparing to leave, the veterinarian approached Emily. "You've done an incredible job with him," he said, with genuine admiration. "Few animals would recover so well after what he went through." "It's because he's truly brave," responded Emily, emotional. "Yes, he is," agreed Dr. Parker, "but also because he found someone who believed in him when no one else did. That makes all the difference." That night, as Emily fell asleep, she didn't imagine that the news of Brave's true identity had already spread through the village, reaching the ears of who least should hear it. At Mr. Joaquin's store, Hank was pounding his fist on the table forcefully, knocking over a glass of whiskey. "Lightning," he vociferated, his face contorted with anger. "That damned horse was lightning all along?" "That's what old Anderson said," confirmed one of the men at the table. "Recognized by the mark and everything." Hank ran his hand over his face, sweating. Despite the coolness of the night, his eyes acquired a dangerous gleam. "You don't understand what this means. If it really is lightning, he's worth a fortune for breeding, even if he can't run anymore. I can't lose that to some random kid." He looked around at the three men accompanying him, all with appearances as hard as his. "Tomorrow night," he declared, lowering his voice, "we're going to end this story once and for all." The next day dawned with a strange quietness. The sky, normally intense blue at that time of year, was covered by gray clouds that promised rain, something rare and precious in rural Texas. Emily woke up feeling an inexplicable uneasiness. She dressed hurriedly and ran to the yard to check on Brave. The horse was calm, grazing on the sparse grass that grew in the shade of the tree. Upon seeing Emily, he raised his head and whinnied softly, as if greeting her. She smiled, relieved, and ran to hug his neck. "Good morning, champion," she whispered, caressing his mane. "Or should I call you Lightning now?" The horse snorted, moving his head from side to side. "No, you're still Brave to me," decided Emily. "The past is behind us." She spent the entire morning caring for him, brushing his coat that now had a healthy shine, and taking him for a short walk around the property. The news that the mistreated animal she had bought was, in fact, a famous rodeo horse had spread quickly, and several neighbors appeared throughout the day, some out of curiosity, others to offer help. "Emily, my child, this place has turned into a pilgrimage," commented Sarah, observing yet another neighbor approaching with a handful of fresh carrots for Brave. "They're just curious, Mom," replied Emily, smiling as she watched the horse politely accept the neighbor's gift. "I don't know," Sarah frowned. "I'm afraid all this attention might end up attracting unwanted visitors." As if responding to her concern, they saw Mr. Anderson approaching hurriedly, his face red from exertion. "Sarah, girl," he called, still a few meters away. "You need to be careful." The two looked at each other alarmed and went to meet him. "What happened, Mr. Anderson?" asked Sarah, leading the old man to the shade of the porch. "It's Hank Dawson," he replied, breathing with difficulty. "He's at Joaquin's store, drunk and furious, saying he's going to recover what's his tonight." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Instinctively, she looked at Brave, who was grazing peacefully, oblivious to the danger surrounding him. "He's not going to take Brave," she declared, her voice trembling but determined. "I won't let him." "It's not that simple, my child," said Mr. Anderson, placing his hand on her shoulder. "Hank isn't alone. He has those henchmen of his, bad men who'll do anything for money." Sarah turned pale. "We need to inform Miss Thompson," she decided, quickly entering the house to get her shawl. "She'll know what to do." "I'll stay here with Emily and the horse," offered Mr. Anderson. "And I've already sent my grandson to call. Some friends, we won't let that bandit get near here." Sarah departed hurriedly for town while Emily and Mr. Anderson prepared for a possible invasion. The old man dug up an old shotgun he kept for emergencies, and Emily reinforced Brave's halter, ensuring it was secure but comfortable. "And if they really come, Mr. Anderson?" she asked, her small voice betraying the fear she felt. The old man smiled gently. "Then they'll find more resistance than they expect. You've already faced a lot for this horse, girl. You're not alone now." By dusk, a small crowd had formed around the house. Mr. Anderson's grandson had brought some friends, strong men who worked in the fields. Mrs. Wilson came with her daughters and nieces, each carrying a pot or pan. "To make noise and scare away the invaders," she explained. Even Pastor John from the small local church appeared, bringing some young people from the prayer group. "Divine justice is on your side, my child," he solemnly declared, blessing Emily and Brave. As night fell, the tension increased. Everyone was on alert, strategically distributed throughout the property. Brave had been taken into the small improvised stable that Mr. Anderson and other neighbors had built in recent weeks, and Emily refused to leave his side. "You need to come inside." "Child," insisted Mrs. Wilson, who had taken command in Sarah's absence. "It's dangerous out here." "I won't leave Brave alone," replied Emily, obstinate. "He would be scared." The truth was that she was scared too. Every shadow, every rustling of leaves made her start. The sky, now completely overcast, didn't even allow the light of the moon to guide them. That's when the first raindrop fell, quickly followed by many others. In minutes, what was a light drizzle transformed into an intense storm, as if the sky, long parched, had decided to pour out all its water at once. "This is good," commented Mr. Anderson, taking shelter under the small eave. "The rain will make it difficult for them." But Emily wasn't so sure. The storm brought with it darkness and noise, the perfect disguise for someone who wanted to approach without being seen or heard, and she was right. It was Brave who noticed first. His ears rose in alert and he began to grow restless in the stable. Emily, who was by his side, caressing him to calm him during the storm, immediately realized something was wrong. "Mr. Anderson," she called, her voice almost swallowed by the sound of the rain. "There's someone out there." Quicker than his age would suggest, the old man was by her side, the shotgun firm in his hands. He looked through the small stable window, trying to see through the curtain of water. "I don't see anything," he murmured, squinting. "Are you sure, girl?" Before Emily could respond, a deafening crash shook the stable door. Someone was trying to break it down. Brave whinnied, frightened, rearing up on his hind legs. "It's him!" shouted Emily, firmly holding the horse's reins to calm him. "It's Hank." Mr. Anderson didn't hesitate. He aimed the shotgun at the door and fired into the air, the sound of the shot echoing above the storm. "Stay back," he shouted. "We have armed men all over the property." There was a moment of tense silence, broken only by the drumming of rain on the roof. Then a hoarse, slurred voice responded from the other side of the door. "Don't be a fool, old man. Hand over the horse and nobody gets hurt." Emily recognized Hank's voice, even distorted by the rain and anger. "The horse isn't yours," she shouted, the sudden courage surprising even herself. "You'll never hurt him again." A dry laugh was the response. "You really think a little girl and an old man can stop me? I have 3 men with me, all armed. You don't want to see blood spilled over a horse." Mr. Anderson positioned himself firmly in front of Emily. "You're not coming in here, Hank," he declared, his voice firm. "And we're not alone." As if to confirm his words, voices began to rise around the stable. The neighbors who had come in support, hidden by the rain, were now manifesting, some banging on pots, others shouting threats. The darkness and the noise of the storm made it impossible to count how many there were. "It's over, Hank," shouted Mr. Anderson's grandson from somewhere in the darkness. "The police are on their way. Ms. Thompson went to get them." A silence followed this declaration. Emily could imagine Hank evaluating his options, realizing that the plan to simply invade and take Brave wouldn't be as easy as he had expected. "This isn't over," Hank's voice finally responded, loaded with threat. "That horse is mine by right and I will have him back." The sound of feet retreating in the mud indicated that he and his companions were withdrawing. Emily released the breath she hadn't realized she was holding, hugging Brave's Hank, who was still trembling slightly. "It's over," she whispered in the horse's ear. "You're safe now." But she knew deep in her heart that this was far from over. Hank wasn't a man to give up easily, especially now that he knew Brave's true value. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The storm passed, leaving behind a dawn as clear as only seen after rain in Texas. The reddened earth, previously parched by the relentless sun, now exhaled a moist and invigorating aroma. Small puddles reflected the clearing sky, and the plants seemed to have gained a new life during the night. At Sarah's house, the atmosphere was one of tense calm. Most of the neighbors had stayed after the night's confrontation, sleeping on improvised mats in the living room and on the porch. Nobody wanted to leave Emily and Brave alone, knowing that Hank might return. "He won't give up so easily," commented Mr. Anderson, while drinking the coffee Sarah had prepared for everyone. "I know men like him. The more resistance they find, the more stubborn they become." "But we can't stay on vigil forever," replied Sarah, tired. "We have to resolve this definitively." The arrival of Miss Thompson interrupted the conversation. The lawyer entered hurriedly, accompanied by a man whom no one immediately recognized. "Good morning, everyone," she greeted, addressing Sarah. "I brought someone who can help." The man stepped forward, taking off his hat as a sign of respect. He was middle-aged, with graying hair and a posture that suggested authority. "This is Lieutenant Brandon Parker of the State Police," introduced Ms. Thompson. "He's in charge of policing the region and is willing to help us." All eyes turned to the newcomer, a mixture of relief and distrust stamped on their faces. In rural Texas, the relationship with police authority wasn't always the friendliest. "I heard about what happened last night," said Lieutenant Parker, his deep and calm voice filling the room. "Ms. Thompson explained the whole situation to me. Threats and attempted invasion are serious crimes, and I intend to investigate the incident properly." "And what about Brave?" asked Emily, anxious. "Will you help us protect him?" The lieutenant looked at the girl with a gentle expression that contrasted with his severe appearance. "I'll do what's in my power," he promised. "But we need to follow legal procedures. Ms. Thompson has already submitted the necessary documents to register the horse in your name, and that's a good start. Lieutenant Parker also has important information to share," added Ms. Thompson, with a small smile that suggested a victory. The policeman nodded, now addressing all those present. "Hank Dawson has a history with the authorities," he revealed. "He's already been investigated for fraud in rodeo competitions, illegal betting, and more recently for animal mistreatment. So far, he's managed to escape convictions thanks to influential friends, but that's changing." A murmur of surprise ran through the room. Although Hank's bad reputation was known in the region, few knew that he had already had problems with the law. "And there's more," continued the lieutenant, pulling a folded paper from the pocket of his uniform. "We contacted the current owner of Heritage Ranch, Robert's son. He confirmed that he sold the horse Lightning to Hank about 2 years ago with all the legal documentation." "Is that good or bad for us?" asked Sarah, confused. "It's excellent," responded Ms. Thompson with enthusiasm. "It means that Hank was in fact the legal owner of the horse when he sold it. This destroys any claim of theft he might make." Emily felt a wave of relief coursing through her body. It was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "So Brave is really mine?" she asked, hardly believing. "We still have to finalize the legal process," explained the lawyer cautiously, "but we're on the right track." Lieutenant Parker completed. "And meanwhile, I'll increase policing in the area. Hank won't try anything while he knows we're watching." The meeting continued with Ms. Thompson explaining the next legal steps, completing the registration of the horse in Emily's name, preparing a possible action against Hank for threats and attempted invasion, and ensuring that all evidence of previous mistreatment was properly documented. "And what about the agricultural exposition?" asked Emily, remembering the original plan. "Can we still participate, Miss?" Thompson exchanged a look with Lieutenant Parker before responding. "It's a delicate matter," she admitted. "On one hand, it would be an excellent opportunity to publicly establish that Brave is yours now, and show everyone how he has improved under your care. On the other hand, it would expose you and the horse to possible confrontations with Hank. He wouldn't miss the chance to appear there," agreed the lieutenant, thoughtful. "But it would also be risky for him to try anything with so many witnesses around." Emily looked out the window to where Brave was peacefully grazing under the vigilance of some neighbors. There was a determination growing inside her, a certainty that she couldn't live in fear forever. "I want to participate," she declared, surprising everyone with her firmness. "Brave deserves to show everyone how strong he is now, and we can't let Hank control our lives." Sarah observed her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. In a few months, Emily had matured years. The shy girl who used to hide behind her mother's skirts now faced threats with her head held high. "If that's what you want, daughter, we'll make it happen," she said, placing her hand on Emily's shoulder. "I support the decision," agreed Ms. Thompson after a moment of reflection. "After all, backing down now would be giving Hank exactly what he wants, for you to feel intimidated." "In that case," interjected Lieutenant Parker, "we need to draw up a plan to ensure everyone's safety. I'll assign some of my men to accompany you on the day of the exposition." The conversation turned to the necessary preparations. The agricultural exposition would happen in less than a month, which gave them time to complete the legal process of registering the horse and continuing with Brave's recovery. While the adults discussed practical details, Emily slipped out to the yard. She approached Brave, who was peacefully grazing under the shade of the old oak tree. The horse raised his head upon seeing her, and his eyes, once dull with sadness, now shone with a new life. "We're going to show everyone who you really are," she whispered, caressing his neck. Not as Lightning, the rodeo champion, but as Brave, the horse who didn't give up. From inside the house, Sarah observed her daughter with the horse, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. By her side, Ms. Thompson followed her gaze. "She has an indomitable spirit, your daughter," commented the lawyer. "I think that's what the horse saw in her, a reflection of himself." "She's always been that way since she was little," responded Sarah with a sigh. "Just like her father. When she sets her mind on something, there's no one who can make her change it." "It's an admirable quality," observed Ms. Thompson, "especially in these difficult times." What neither of them knew was that, at that exact moment, a dozen miles away, Hank was also making his plans. Sitting on the porch of his small property, he observed the horizon with cold and calculating eyes. "The agricultural exposition," he murmured to himself, a crooked smile forming on his sun-marked face. "Perfect. It will be the ideal moment to recover what is mine by right." The weeks preceding the agricultural exposition passed in a whirlwind of activities. Emily's life, once so predictable in its simplicity, was now filled with a succession of new challenges and learning. Every morning before the sun even rose, she was already up to take care of Brave. Dr. Parker had developed a complete rehabilitation program for the horse with specific exercises to strengthen his muscles and increase his endurance. Emily followed each recommendation with almost religious dedication. "I'm impressed with his progress," commented the veterinarian during one of his weekly visits. "Animals like this usually take much longer to recover, if they recover completely at all." "It's because he's special," replied Emily simply, while brushing Brave's coat, which now shone like silk under the sun. The transformation of the horse was, in fact, remarkable. His ribs no longer appeared under the skin, and his gait, once faltering and painful, had become firm and even graceful. His eyes, which before reflected only resignation and suffering, were now alive and alert. And most surprising, Brave had developed an almost supernatural connection with Emily. "It's as if they talk without words," commented Mrs. Wilson to Sarah, as they watched the girl guiding the horse in a small circuit they had improvised on the land. "I've never seen anything like it. My husband always said that horses choose their owners, not the other way around," replied Sarah, not hiding the pride in her voice. It seems he was right. In town, Miss Thompson worked tirelessly on the legal aspects of the situation. Finally, on a sunny Wednesday, she appeared at Sarah's house with important news. "We did it," she announced, brandishing an official envelope. "The ownership registration has been approved. Officially, Brave now belongs to Emily Miller." "Is it true?" asked Emily, hardly able to believe, taking the document with trembling hands. "Absolute truth," confirmed the lawyer, smiling upon seeing the joy on the girl's face. "And more. I managed to locate the veterinarian who treated Lightning during the years he belonged to Heritage Ranch. He provided a detailed statement of the animal's medical history, including distinctive marks and physical characteristics. This further solidifies our position." "And what about Hank?" asked Sarah, always practical. "Does he know yet?" Ms. Thompson's smile diminished a little. "He probably already knows or will know soon. This kind of news travels fast. But legally, he no longer has any right to the horse. If he tries anything, he'll clearly be breaking the law." "As if that would stop him," muttered Sarah, glancing nervously out the window, as if expecting to see Hank appear at any moment. "That's why we continue with our precautions," reminded Ms. Thompson. "Lieutenant Parker has increased patrols in the area, and several neighbors continue taking turns keeping watch, especially at night." The lawyer turned her attention to Emily, who was still holding the document as if it were the most precious of treasures. "And how are the preparations for the exposition going?" The girl's face lit up again. "We're progressing," she responded enthusiastically. "Brave can now complete the entire course without getting tired. and Dr. Parker said his coat is almost perfect. And the presentation itself, have you decided how it will be? Emily bit her lip, a little unsure. Actually, I don't really know what they expect from us. I've never been to an exposition before. Miss Thompson smiled understandingly. That's why I brought someone who can help, she said, indicating the front door. He's outside waiting to meet Brave. Curious, Emily ran to the door, followed closely by Sarah. On the porch, a tall, lean young man waited patiently. He must have been little more than 20, with dark hair and a friendly smile. Emily, this is Michael, introduced Ms. Thompson. He works with horse training at Horizon Ranch, one of the largest in the region. He agreed to help you prepare Brave for the exposition. Michael extended his hand to Emily, who shook it shyly. Ms. Thompson told me your story, he said. I was impressed. Not just anyone can recover a horse in the state he was in. Actually, it was more Brave who recovered on his own, replied Emily modestly. I just gave him a chance. Even so, insisted Michael. It shows you have a gift. Would you like to introduce me to the champion? Minutes later, they were all in the small improvised corral where Brave now spent most of his time. The horse observed the newcomer with initial distrust, ears alert. He still gets nervous with strangers, explained Emily, caressing Brave's neck to calm him. That's understandable after what he's been through, replied Michael, maintaining a respectful distance. Horses have long memories, especially for traumatic experiences. With patience and gentleness, he gradually approached, always speaking in a soft tone and letting Brave smell him before attempting any physical contact. After a few minutes, the horse visibly relaxed, allowing Michael to examine his legs and back. Impressive, murmured the trainer, more to himself than to the others. Considering everything, he's in excellent shape. Turning to Emily, he explained, for the exposition, we'll need to work on 3 main areas: physical presentation, basic obedience, and a small demonstration. Nothing too demanding considering his history, but enough to show his qualities. In the following weeks, Michael became a constant presence at the property. Every day after finishing his work at Horizon Ranch, he would come to train Emily and Brave. He taught the girl how to properly prepare the horse for presentation, from the perfect brushing of the coat to the right way to position him for the judges. Keep his head up like this, he instructed, gently adjusting Brave's posture. And always stay on the left side when presenting him. It's tradition. Emily absorbed every teaching eagerly, but what enchanted her most were the free training sessions when Michael encouraged her to simply mount and walk with Brave through the field. The connection between you is the most important thing, he explained. The judges can see the technique, but the audience feels the story. One of those afternoons when the sun was beginning to set, painting the Texas sky with orange tones, Michael brought a surprise, a beautiful new set of harness, complete with a saddle suitable for Brave. It's a gift, he said, handing the equipment to a stunned Emily. From everyone at Horizon Ranch, we were touched by your story. Michael, this is, she began, speechless, touching the soft leather and shiny metal details. It must have cost a fortune. He smiled, shrugging his shoulders. The boss insisted, said it's a way to support animal welfare in the region. Besides, he added, winking, he never liked Hank Dawson much. The news that Emily would be presenting Lightning, now Brave, at the agricultural exposition had spread far beyond the small village. Local newspapers had published small notes about the story of the rescued horse, and even a regional television crew had appeared to do a report. I never imagined we would become famous, commented Sarah, after answering questions from an enthusiastic journalist. It's a story that touches people's hearts, replied Ms. Thompson, who now treated the case more as a personal mission than a job. The poor girl who saves the champion horse, giving him a second chance at life. It's like a modern fairy tale. With only 3 days until the exposition, the excitement was palpable. Sarah was busy sewing a special outfit for Emily to wear during the presentation, while Michael gave the final touches to the training. You're ready, he declared, after a particularly successful session. The rest is just confidence. That night, as Emily prepared for bed, a feeling of anxiety and excitement prevented her from relaxing. She got up silently, and went out to the yard where Brave was resting under the stars. "I'm nervous," she confessed, sitting beside him on the grass, still damp from the evening dew. "What if we're not good enough? What if Hank shows up and does something?" Brave turned his head toward her, his large and expressive eyes seeming to understand every word. Gently, he rested his muzzle on her shoulder in a gesture that seemed to say, "We're in this together." Emily smiled, feeling peace return to her heart. The result of the exposition or what Hank was planning didn't matter. What mattered was the path they had traveled together, the mutual transformation they had experienced. "You gave me courage, you know," she murmured, hugging the horse's strong neck. "Before you, I would never have confronted a man like Hank. I would never have spoken with important people like Ms. Thompson or Lieutenant Parker." The stars shone intensely in the Texas sky, like thousands of silent witnesses to that moment of connection. Emily didn't know what the future held, but of one thing she was certain: together she and Brave were invincible. The dawn of the day of the agricultural exposition brought with it a sky of an almost unreal blue. Emily opened her eyes before the first ray of sunlight, her heart racing with anticipation. This would be the day they had been waiting for, the day Brave would show everyone his true nature. She jumped out of bed and dressed quickly. Sarah was already in the kitchen, preparing a hearty breakfast for the big day. "Did you sleep well, daughter?" she asked, noticing the girl's bright eyes. "I barely slept," confessed Emily, taking a piece of bread. "I kept thinking about how today will be." Sarah smiled, understanding. "Everything will be fine. You two are more than ready." After breakfast, Emily ran to the corral where Brave was already waiting, as if he too knew the importance of that day. She spent almost an hour brushing his coat until it shone like satin under the morning sun, while softly humming to calm him and herself. "You look beautiful," she said, taking a step back to admire the result of her work. "The most handsome of all." At 9 o'clock sharp, the truck that would take them to the exposition arrived. It was a special vehicle for transporting animals, lent by Horizon Ranch, with Michael at the wheel. "Ready for the big day?" he asked, jumping out to help with Brave's boarding. The process of getting the horse into the transport was easier than they had expected. With Emily gently guiding him and Michael giving instructions, Brave climbed the ramp without hesitation, as if he completely trusted those who were leading him. "That's a good sign," commented Michael as he closed the rear door of the truck. "Nervous horses usually resist boarding." He's calm. During the almost hour-long journey to the town where the exposition would be held, Emily remained in the back of the truck with Brave, continuously talking to him in a low voice, ensuring that the trip was as stress-free as possible. As they approached the town, the movement on the roads increased considerably. Cars, trucks, and even carriages converged to the same destination, the large field where the exposition was set up. "I've never seen so many people," murmured Sarah, looking out the truck window, impressed with the crowd that was already gathering. In the surroundings, when they finally arrived, they were greeted by an organization employee who led them to the area reserved for participants of the equine show. "You are entry number 27, he informed, handing a badge to Emily. "The presentation to the jury will be at 2 in the afternoon in the central arena. Until then, you can use the designated stable for rest and final preparation." The stable was simple but clean and comfortable. Brave seemed to approve of the environment, willingly accepting the fresh water and quality hay that were provided. Emily remained by his side, adjusting the new harness and making sure he was perfectly presentable. Shortly before noon, Ms. Thompson appeared, accompanied by Lieutenant Parker, both formally dressed for the occasion. "I came to check if everything is in order," explained the lawyer, visibly proud to see Brave so beautiful and well cared for, "and also to bring important news." "What news?" asked Sarah, immediately alert. "Hank Dawson is here," responded Lieutenant Parker, without beating around the bush. "He was seen circulating around the exposition area about an hour ago." Emily's heart raced. Although she had expected this, confirmation of her adversary's presence made everything more real and more frightening. "Did he come alone?" asked Michael, tense. "No," replied the lieutenant. "He's with two men we know well. Both have had problems with the law before." "You don't need to worry," assured Miss Thompson quickly, upon seeing the fear in Emily's eyes. "Lieutenant Parker has 4 officers strategically positioned throughout the venue. Besides, we have the ownership documents right here in case he tries anything." Emily nodded, trying to calm herself. She turned her attention back to Brave, who seemed oblivious to the tension around him, calmly chewing the hay. "He won't manage to ruin our day," she said, determined. "Not after everything we've been through." The following hours passed in a whirlwind of activities. Various visitors stopped to admire Brave, many having already heard the story of the rescued horse. Some recognized in him the former champion Lightning, expressing surprise and admiration for his recovery. As the moment of the presentation approached, Emily put on the outfit her mother had specially made for the occasion, a simple but elegant ensemble, in shades of blue and white with lace details that recalled the traditions of Texas. Her hair was braided by Mrs. Wilson, who insisted on intertwining small white flowers, giving a special touch to the presentation. "You look beautiful," said Sarah, her eyes watering as she saw her daughter ready. "Your father would be so proud." Emily smiled, feeling a pang of longing, how she wished her father was there to see her. When the time finally came, Michael helped lead Brave to the waiting area near the central arena. Other competitors were already awaiting their turn, most mounted on imposing and well-trained horses belonging to large ranches in the region. "Don't be intimidated," advised Michael, noticing Emily's nervous look at the competitors. "You have something that none of them have, a story of overcoming, and that's worth more than any pedigree." The presentation followed a predetermined order, and Emily attentively observed each competitor who entered the arena. Some executed complex maneuvers, others bet on the imposing strength of their animals. The judges, 3 serious men seated in a small elevated tribune, evaluated each detail with impenetrable expressions. It was then that she saw him. Hank was standing on the other side of the arena, partially hidden by a column, observing everything with a predatory look. By his side, 2 burly men remained vigilant, like guard dogs ready to attack. "He's there," she whispered to Michael, discreetly indicating the direction. The trainer nodded, already aware of the former cowboy's presence. "Don't divert your attention to him. Focus only on yourself and Brave." "Entry number 27, Emily Miller with Brave," announced the loudspeaker, startling the girl. A brief silence fell over the audience when Emily led Brave into the arena. It was an unusual sight, a simple girl from rural Texas, without the apparatus or experience of the other competitors, guiding a horse that, although visibly recovered, still carried the marks of his difficult past. Following Michael's instructions, Emily positioned Brave in the center of the arena, in profile to the judges, allowing them to appreciate his structure. Then she led him in a perfect circle, showing his now rhythmic and elegant walk. Finally, with a small signal, she made Brave bow in a reverence, a simple trick that Michael had taught in the last week of training. The audience applauded enthusiastically, touched by the evident connection between the girl and the horse. The judges exchanged looks, apparently impressed, and made some notes on their clipboards. Emily smiled, feeling more confident. She led Brave out of the arena, where she was received with emotional hugs from her mother and friends. "You were perfect," exclaimed Mrs. Wilson, wiping tears of emotion. "Now we wait for the results," commented Ms. Thompson, checking the exposition program. "The award ceremony will be at 5 o'clock on the main stage." The waiting time seemed to drag on infinitely. Emily remained beside Brave in the stable, receiving occasional visits from people who had watched the presentation and wanted to know more about the story of the rescued horse. Some even offered to buy Brave for considerable values, proposals that Emily politely but firmly refused. Finally, the moment of the award ceremony arrived. All participants were called to the main stage, where the judges and local authorities were waiting to announce the winners of the various categories. The main stage of the agricultural exposition was decorated with colorful banners and arrangements of flowers, typical of the region. A long table, covered with a white tablecloth, displayed gleaming trophies of various sizes and shapes. Behind, It sat the judges and local authorities, including the mayor of Hope Springs, who had arrived especially for the award ceremony. Emily, leading Brave by the halter, positioned herself along with the other competitors. The contrast between her, a simple girl from rural Texas, and the other participants, mostly adult men representing large ranches in the region, was evident. Some cast condescending glances at the unusual duo, while others showed genuine admiration for the girl's courage. Sarah, accompanied by Ms. Thompson, Michael, and several neighbors who had come to support the event, waited anxiously in the front row of the audience. Lieutenant Parker remained vigilant, discreetly circulating around the venue, always keeping an eye on Hank and his henchmen, who had strategically positioned themselves at the back of the enclosure. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the master of ceremonies, a middle-aged man with a powerful voice, "it is with great satisfaction that we begin the award ceremony of the 35th Hope Springs Agricultural Exposition. We will start with the equine category, beauty and presentation." Emily felt her heart race. It was the category in which they had entered Brave. She caressed the horse's neck, seeking both to comfort the animal and to calm herself. "In third place," announced the Master of Ceremonies after receiving an envelope from one of the judges, with 87 points representing Goodwin Ranch, Anthony Cardoso with the horse Thunder. A robust middle-aged man advanced with his imposing black horse to receive the bronze trophy amid enthusiastic applause. "In second place with 92 points, continued the announcer after a brief pause for the applause to diminish, representing Horizon Ranch, Robert Mendez with the horse Hurricane. New applause, now accompanied by some whistles of approval, as a stylish young man received the silver trophy, smiling with satisfaction. The Master of Ceremonies made a dramatic pause before announcing the grand winner. Emily felt her legs tremble slightly, divided between hope and apprehension. "And the grand champion of the category, with an impressive 98 points, he finally announced, his voice laden with emotion. Representing the community of Green Ridge, Emily Miller with the horse Brave." For a moment, Emily was paralyzed, unable to believe what she had just heard. It was the gentle nudge of Brave on her shoulder that made her wake up and advance, trembling with emotion, toward the stage. The audience erupted in applause and shouts of approval. Sarah openly cried, embraced by Ms. Thompson, while Michael and the neighbors jumped and celebrated as if it were a football championship. "Congratulations, young lady," said the mayor, handing her the imposing golden trophy. "The story of you and your horse is already an inspiration for our entire region." Emily accepted the trophy, barely able to hold it due to its size and weight. Brave by her side seemed to perfectly understand the moment, maintaining a proud, almost dignified posture. It was then that the unexpected happened. Hank, who, until then, had kept his distance, abruptly advanced toward the stage, followed closely by his two henchmen. "This is a farce," he shouted, interrupting the ceremony. "That horse was stolen from me." A buzz of surprise ran through the crowd. "Lieutenant?" Parker and his men immediately mobilized, quickly approaching, but Hank had already reached the stage. "This animal is Lightning, my prize-winning horse," he continued, his face contorted with rage. "This girl stole him, and now she's being rewarded for it." "That's not true," protested Emily, feeling her blood boil with indignation. "I bought Brave at the market. You had abandoned him to suffer." The situation threatened to spiral out of control when an elderly man, wearing an elegant leather hat and leaning on a cane, rose from the audience. His face, marked by years of work under the merciless Texas sun, displayed an expression of profound indignation. "Silence," he ordered, with an authority that made everyone immediately quiet down. "I know the truth about this horse." Everyone turned their attention to the elderly man, who was slowly walking toward the stage. "My name is Walter Roberts," he introduced himself, his voice firm despite his advanced age. "I owned Heritage Ranch for more than 50 years until I passed it to my son after a health issue, and this horse," he pointed to Brave, "was born on my land." A murmur ran through the crowd. Even Hank seemed surprised by the old rancher's appearance. "Lightning was special from the time he was a colt," continued Mr. Roberts, approaching to caress Brave's neck, who received him with a soft whinny as if recognizing an old friend. "He had speed, intelligence, and heart. We won many prizes together." Turning to Hank, his countenance hardened. "But then during my illness, my son sold him to this man." He pointed accusingly at Hank. "A mistake I bitterly regretted when I learned of the conditions in which you kept him, forcing him beyond his limits until you nearly destroyed him." The old rancher turned back to Brave, his eyes watering with emotion. "When I heard he had disappeared, I thought he was gone forever. Some even said you had put him down," he continued, facing Hank with contempt. "But then, a few weeks ago, I started hearing stories about a girl who had rescued a dying horse and was bringing him back to life. And when I heard it might be lightning, I had to come see with my own eyes." Emily observed the scene in silence, moved and surprised by the turn of events. Mr. Roberts approached her with a gentle smile. "You did what I couldn't do, girl. You brought back not just his health, but his dignity. And for that," his voice faltered slightly, "I owe you an eternal debt." Turning to the audience and authorities, the old rancher raised his voice. "This horse was legally sold to Hank, who then discarded him like trash when he no longer served his purposes. The girl bought him, also legally, and dedicated herself to saving him. There is no doubt about who deserves to keep him." Lieutenant Parker seized the moment to intervene, positioning himself between Hank and Emily. "Mr. Hank Dawson, you are disturbing a public ceremony with false accusations," he firmly declared. "I suggest you leave peacefully, or I will be forced to detain you for contempt." Surrounded by police officers and facing the hostility of the crowd, who now clearly supported Emily, Hank backed down, but not without casting a threatening look at the girl. "This isn't over," he muttered low enough that only Emily could hear. "That horse is mine by right, and I will recover him." While security escorted Hank and his henchmen out of the venue, Miss Thompson took the stage, carrying a folder of documents. "If I may," she said, addressing the present authorities, "I would like to officially present the documents that prove the legal ownership of Brave by young Emily. All records are in order, including the transfer duly approved by the competent body." The mayor examined the documents and nodded, satisfied. "Everything is in order," he publicly declared. "This horse legally belongs to Emily Miller." A deafening applause followed this declaration. Mr. Roberts embraced Emily, moved. "Take good care of him," he whispered in the girl's ear. "He has found in you the home he deserved." The ceremony resumed its normal course, but now with an even more intense atmosphere of celebration. When it all ended, Emily, proudly holding her trophy and leading Brave, was surrounded by reporters and admirers. "How do you feel being the grand champion?" asked a journalist, extending a microphone to her. Emily looked at Brave, then at her mother, at Miss Thompson, Michael, and all the friends who had believed in her. "We were already winners before this award," she replied, with a wisdom that surprised everyone. "Each day that Brave spends healthy and happy is a victory much greater than any trophy." The return to Greenridge after the agricultural exposition was triumphant. The truck transporting Emily and Brave, now accompanied by a small caravan of vehicles, was received with a celebration by the residents who could not attend the event. An improvised banner had been stretched across the entrance to the village. "Welcome to the champions of Hope Springs." "Is this for us?" asked Emily, amazed, as the truck slowed down to pass under the banner. "Who else would it be for?" responded Sarah, smiling proudly. "You are the celebrities of the moment." In the days that followed, Sarah's house became a pilgrimage point. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers appeared bringing gifts, offering congratulations, or simply to see the famous horse that had won everyone's heart with his story of overcoming. "I never imagined our life would change so much because of a horse," commented Sarah one night, as she and Emily had dinner after a particularly busy day. Emily smiled, looking out the window to where Brave was resting peacefully under the stars. "He's not just a horse, Mom. He's a symbol of hope." Interest in Brave's story surpassed the boundaries of the small village. Regional newspapers published detailed reports about the girl who had saved a champion horse, and even a national television station sent a team to do a special feature. "Are you handling all this attention well?" asked Miss Thompson during one of her visits. observing Emily patiently responding to a reporter's questions. "Sometimes it's tiring," admitted the girl when they were finally alone. "But if it helps other people realize the importance of taking good care of animals, it's worth it." Even more surprising was the visit they received about 2 weeks after the exposition. One sunny morning, an elegant car parked in front of the small house. From it descended Mr. Roberts, the former owner of Heritage Ranch, accompanied by a younger man who introduced himself as his son, James. "We've come with a proposal for you," explained Mr. Roberts after the initial greetings. "Something I believe will be beneficial for everyone, especially for Brave." Seated in the small living room, the old rancher outlined his idea. Heritage Ranch, although reduced in size due to financial difficulties in recent years, still maintained one of the best horse breeding programs in the region. What was missing was precisely a quality stallion for reproduction. Lightning, he always referred to Brave by his original name, has an exceptional lineage. His colts would be highly valued, especially now that his story is known. "You want to buy Brave?" asked Emily, feeling a tightening in her heart. "No, my dear," responded Mr. Roberts gently. "I'm proposing a partnership. Brave would remain yours, but would spend part of his time at Heritage Ranch, where we would have the appropriate structure to use him as a breeder. You would receive a percentage for each colt born." James, who until then had remained silent, added, "We would also like to offer you a job at the ranch, Emily. We need someone with your talent for handling horses. It would be part-time so you can continue your studies." Emily looked at her mother, surprised and confused by the unexpected proposal. Sarah seemed equally astonished. "It's a lot to decide just like that," she said cautiously. "We need to think carefully." Of course," agreed Mr. Roberts. "We don't expect an immediate answer, but there's one more thing I'd like to show you." From inside his jacket, he removed an envelope that he handed to Emily. "I heard your father is working in the South under difficult conditions," he said. "This is a work contract, offering him a position as foreman at Heritage Ranch. The salary is good and it includes housing for the family. If you accept, we could arrange for him to return immediately." Silent tears ran down Emily's face as she held the envelope. The possibility of having the family reunited again after so long seemed like an impossible dream becoming reality. "Why are you doing this for us?" asked Sarah, moved but cautious. "You barely know us." The old rancher smiled, a smile laden with memories and regrets. "When my son sold Lightning to Hank, I made the mistake of not intervening," he explained. "I was sick, weak, but still, I should have prevented it. What happened afterward to that noble animal was, in part, my responsibility." He looked out the window to where Brave was peacefully grazing. "What you did, young Emily, was not just save a horse. It was to redeem a mistake that I helped commit. This is my way of thanking and somehow compensating for the suffering I could have prevented." The decision wasn't made that day, nor in the days immediately following. Emily and Sarah discussed at length, weighing pros and cons, consulting Ms. Thompson about the legal aspects of the proposal, and even talking with trusted neighbors. "I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams for me, Mom," said Emily one night as they contemplated the stars sitting on the porch. "I know you like it here, our home." Sarah smiled, hugging her daughter. "My home is where my family is, child. And the idea of having your father back, of seeing you grow up with opportunities we never had, that's worth more than these walls." 2 weeks later, the decision was made. The Roberts proposal was accepted, with some modifications suggested by Ms. Thompson to protect Emily's interests and ensure that Brave continued legally as her property. The ranch sent a representative to the southern part of the country with the mission to find Jack Miller and bring him back to Texas. Meanwhile, Emily, Sarah, and Brave remained in Greenridge, preparing for the move that would transform their lives. It was on a particularly hot afternoon that the news arrived, through a phone call to Joaquin's store, the only place in the village with a telephone. "They found your husband," announced Mr. Joaquin, breathless after running to Sarah's house. "He arrives tomorrow in Dallas on the 2 o'clock bus." The wait for Jack Miller's arrival was the longest of Emily's life. At the Dallas bus station, accompanied by her mother, and by James Roberts, who had insisted on picking them up in his car, she could barely contain her anxiety. When the bus finally parked and passengers began to disembark, Emily anxiously searched for the familiar face. It was Sarah who saw him first. "There," she exclaimed, pointing to a thin man with a tired appearance who was getting off the bus carrying a small suitcase. "Dad!" shouted Emily, running in his direction, tears of joy blurring her vision. The reunion was emotional. Father, mother, and daughter united in a tight embrace, years of absence and longing dissolving into tears and smiles. Jack Miller could hardly believe the story they told him during the trip back. His little Emily had become a local heroine, the savior of a champion horse. "I always knew you were special, my daughter," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "From the time you were little, you had this way with animals, just like your grandfather." Arrival at Heritage Ranch was the beginning of a new chapter. The family was installed in a comfortable house, much larger than their old home in Green Ridge. Brave gained a spacious stable, with access to verdant pastures where he could run freely, and Emily, to her joy, was enrolled in the town school, where she could continue her education without having to walk miles every day. In the weeks and months that followed, life found its rhythm. Jack Miller quickly adapted to the role of foreman, his knowledge about horses and his work ethic, earning the respect of everyone at the ranch. Sarah, initially apprehensive about the change, soon fell in love with the place, especially the garden she began to cultivate around the house. And Brave, he flourished like never before. Under Emily's attentive care and with the professional supervision of the ranch's veterinarians, he completely recovered his health and vigor. The breeding program began cautiously, and in less than a year, Brave's first colt was born, a beautiful foal with golden coat that had inherited its father's expressive eyes. "Look, Brave," whispered Emily, as the horse attentively observed, his offspring taking its first faltering steps. "This is your family now. Like us, you have a new beginning." As for Hank, he ended up facing justice not for the dispute with Emily, but for other accusations of fraud and animal mistreatment. The evidence provided by Lieutenant Parker and other breeders who had suffered from his practices was sufficient to ensure his conviction. The news brought relief to everyone, although Emily, with the wisdom she had developed throughout her journey, felt more pity than anger for the man who had almost destroyed Brave. On a spring morning, almost 2 years, after rescuing Brave from the livestock market, Emily rode along the perimeter of the ranch, accompanied by the now imposing animal. They stopped at the top of a hill, contemplating the horizon where the green of the pastures met the blue of the sky. "Just look at us, Brave," she said, caressing the horse's lustrous mane. "Who would have thought we'd come so far?" Brave whinnied, softly as if responding. His story, which had begun with abandonment and despair, had transformed into a symbol of hope and renewal, not just for him and Emily, but for all who knew their journey. And there on that hilltop, bathed in the golden light of the rising sun, rider and horse represented the purest truth, that courage, compassion, and faith can transform even the most desperate circumstances into opportunities for a new beginning. In the distance, Brave's first colt galloped freely, its golden coat gleaming under the sun, carrying in its veins the legacy of its father, not just his strength and beauty, but also his incredible ability to rise from the ashes, like a phoenix. Of the Texan countryside,